The mic wasn't even pointed at her when she said it. She didn't need it. Her voice just carried. Somehow louder than the background jazz, louder than the clinking of forks, louder than my pulse. Oh, he doesn't get it. Reed still thinks SEO is a type of medical scan. Laughter. Full volume. People actually clapped. Someone at her table snorted so hard they spilled their water. I stood there, 10 feet behind her, holding a glass of sparkling apple cider because I don't drink anymore. She knows that. I just come back from the restroom. Or maybe I just needed to breathe. It doesn't matter now. She hadn't seen me. Not yet. She was mid-sentence, mid-joke, mid-spotlight. Hair perfect. That metallic chain she wears when she's trying to feel expensive. Back arched just enough to look confident, but not enough to seem like she's trying. She was at ease. And I realized something then. She didn't think I was real. I was a concept. An accessory. A conversation piece to poke fun at between courses. And I knew if I walked away right then, through the side exit just past the ice sculpture, she wouldn't notice for at least 7 more minutes. So I timed it. I checked my watch as I left the banquet room. 9:13 p.m. No one followed. No one stopped me. The coat check guy smiled politely like I was just another full-bellied executive calling it an early night. I tipped him 5. I don't know why. In the lobby, I sat on one of those velvet couches they always have near the elevators, scrolling my phone just to keep my hands from shaking. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even embarrassed. I was gone. Emotionally, spiritually, maybe even legally. I don't know. By 9:23 p.m., I turned my phone screen back on. For missed calls. By 9:26, a 5th one. And then the first text. Where did you go? Reed? Followed by, that was just a joke, OMG. Everyone laughed. Then, people are asking where you went. Come back. Please. But I was already halfway across the parking garage, pressing the unlock button like it owed me something. That night wasn't when the marriage ended. No, it ended 3 weeks later, when I finally told her exactly what I did after I left. And what I found out. Because this wasn't just about a joke. This wasn't just about me leaving a chair empty. It was about why she thought I'd never have the guts to. 3 days passed before she brought it up. Not the joke, no. That was apparently just humor, how people talk in her field, and nothing personal. What she wanted to talk about was why I walked out, without saying anything, and why I made a scene by not making a scene. I told her I just didn't feel well. She nodded, almost relieved. Like she could file that excuse away neatly in the Reed's Feelings folder that never needed to be opened again. But I wasn't sick. Not unless you count the kind of sick you feel when someone gently but consistently makes you feel like background noise. Like your loyalty is assumed, your silence is expected, and your absence, temporary. I waited until Thursday night. She was at a strategy sync dinner, whatever that means. I was home early. I had started to make myself dinner, but ended up just standing in the kitchen, holding a spatula, staring at the pan like it had wronged me. Then I walked to her side of the closet. It wasn't planned. I wasn't snooping. At least that's what I told myself at first. I just wanted to confirm something. I wanted to know if she'd bothered to hang up the dress from the event. She hadn't. It was stuffed, half-folded, into her bottom drawer, beneath some travel workout clothes and a scarf she hadn't worn since the pandemic. And under that drawer, hidden behind the false bottom I hadn't noticed before, there was another phone. An older model, still in airplane mode. Now let me pause here. I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to conclusions. I'm the opposite, actually, too trusting, too patient, too willing to explain away the things that make my stomach twist. But this wasn't a charger or a work backup or some emergency flip phone. It had fingerprints. It was warm. And when I turned airplane mode off, it connected to our Wi-Fi automatically. There were only a few texts on it. Most had been deleted, badly, lazily, like someone who thought the effort mattered more than the risk. I'll never forget the first name that popped up in the remaining thread. Wes. Not Weston. Not Wells. Just Wes. I scrolled. My hands felt like someone else's. Wes, you were on fire last night. Seriously. You always know exactly what to say. Callie, you should have seen his face when they laughed. Total deer in headlights. Wes, bet he still thinks you're his little secretary wife, LOL. Callie, he thinks we're trying for a baby next year. Isn't that adorable? I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat down on the floor of the closet and stared at the light leaking from the hallway. The thing is, I had known. Not exactly, not clearly, But deep down, I had known. Her laughter had changed. Her touches had stopped. Her stories had turned into summaries. And I had ignored every signal because I didn't want to admit I wasn't enough. But now, sitting there, the phone buzzing again in my hand with a new message from Wes, I didn't feel small. I felt like someone new, like a man quietly walking back to his chair, not to sit in it, but to remove it. From the table, from the room, from her world entirely. And what I did next made her realize exactly how real that empty seat would become. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe, deep down, I just wanted to see how far her world went without me in it. I sat there on the carpet for a long time, staring at the glow of that old phone. My reflection trembled on the black screen when I finally typed something. I didn't send it as myself, though. I replied as her. Just one message. Nothing wild, nothing that could blow my cover. I wrote, "We might need to cool it for a while. He's starting to notice things." It felt wrong and electric at the same time. The dots popped up almost immediately, the typing bubble pulsing like a heartbeat. "Wes, that's fine. He's not a problem, Callie. He never was. Not a problem." I don't know why those 3 words hurt worse than the rest. They weren't cruel. They weren't even angry. They were dismissive. Like I was a minor inconvenience, a distant shadow behind their spotlight. For a while, I just watched the screen, waiting for more. Then another message came in. "Wes, I'll book the weekend house again. Just in case." I locked the phone. I didn't want to see more. I already knew what the weekend house meant. Callie had a team retreat coming up. She said it was about project bonding, a getaway for creative collaboration. She even invited me to tag along if I wanted a break from forklifts. I'd said no, of course. I didn't want to embarrass her in front of her colleagues. But now, sitting in the quiet of our home, I realized that trip wasn't work-related at all. When she got back that night, her perfume hit the air before she even opened the bedroom door. "You're still up?" she asked softly. I was sitting on the couch, pretending to scroll my phone, though my mind was looping the phrase, "He's not a problem." "Yeah," I said, "just catching up on some things." She smiled, small, distracted. "Don't stay up too late. Big morning tomorrow." I nodded, pretending I didn't notice the faint shimmer of a hickey hidden beneath her hairline, the uneven lipstick she hadn't wiped completely clean. She disappeared into the bathroom, humming to herself. I heard the shower turn on, the click of her phone being plugged in, her main phone, not the one I'd found. And then, out of nowhere, I realized something terrifyingly simple. If I confronted her now, she'd lie. She'd cry. She'd twist it all until somehow I was the jealous husband who never supported her growth. I'd seen her do it to others, gently, expertly. She could make guilt sound logical. So I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I carefully slid the secret phone back where I'd found it and closed the drawer. The next day, she left early for work. But she made one mistake, a small, stupid one. She left her planner on the kitchen counter, the one she always carried everywhere. Inside was a folded receipt from a place called Silver Pines Cabin. It was dated for the weekend ahead. That morning, I called in sick. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel guilty lying to my boss. Because I knew exactly what I was going to do with those 2 free days. I wasn't planning revenge. Not exactly. I just wanted truth. To see what they both laughed about when I wasn't around. To know what kind of man Wes really was. And maybe, to remind her that even the quiet ones, the ones you joke about, dismiss, overlook, can still choose when to leave the room. So I packed a bag, a camera, a coat, and by Friday afternoon, I was driving north towards Silver Pines, rehearsing what I'd say if she looked me in the eyes and tried to call me darling again. The road to Silver Pines was narrower than I remembered. Years ago, Callie and I had passed a similar stretch on the way to a vineyard tour, back when weekends were still about us, not networking opportunities or corporate bonding. The tires crunched over gravel as I turned off the main road and followed the path lined with trees that looked like they had secrets of their own. I cut the headlights as I approached the entrance to the property. The cabin wasn't visible from the road, but I could see the faint amber glow of porch lights through the branches. I parked a little farther up the hill, just out of sight, brought binoculars, a thermos of coffee, and my old DSLR camera with the long lens I hadn't touched in 4 years. The wind bit through my jacket as I waited, crouched behind a split-rail fence, watching the gravel driveway with the same slow burn dread people probably feel before opening a sealed envelope from the hospital. At 5:41 p.m., a silver hatchback pulled in. Callie stepped out first. Same laugh. Same scarf from the gala. Same boots I helped her choose last Christmas. Then the driver door opened. A man got out. Tall. Clean cut. Wes, I assumed. He didn't carry any luggage. Just walked around the car and touched her waist like he'd done it 100 times before. She leaned into it. Familiar. Casual. There wasn't even hesitation. They unlocked the door to the cabin and disappeared inside. That should have been the part that broke me. But weirdly, it didn't. It was the little things that hit harder. The way she turned to make sure the door clicked shut. The way she swatted at his shoulder while laughing, like some college kid flirting at a frat party. The way he put his arm around her neck and held her there, almost possessively. And suddenly, it wasn't pain I felt. It was distance. Like I'd been plucked from my own life and dropped into someone else's bad dream. I stayed out there for hours, taking photos. Not for revenge. Not to show anyone. Just to prove to myself that this was really happening. That it wasn't in my head. That she had truly chosen to come here. With him, instead of having the hard conversation she owed me. The worst moment came just after 10 p.m. They lit the fireplace. I could see it through a small gap in the curtains. They were sitting on the rug. She had a wine glass in one hand, the other resting on his leg like it belonged there. He leaned over and whispered something. She laughed. Not a big laugh, just one of those soft, real ones. The kind I hadn't heard in months. And that's when it hit me. He knew a version of her that I hadn't met yet. One she had shaped just for him. But something was off. Callie kept checking her phone. Not her main one, the other. The burner. She had it next to her wine glass. She picked it up a few times, typed something, then hesitated. Finally, she set it screen down on the floor and sighed. That's when I realized she hadn't seen my last message yet. The one I sent from her account, pretending to be her. She was nervous. He didn't seem to notice. By midnight, I had all I needed. And then, stupidly, I did something impulsive. I drafted a message to her real phone. My actual number. Something she couldn't ignore. It read, "You don't have to explain anything. Just look outside." I waited exactly 2 minutes. Then stepped out from the shadows, just enough to be seen, just enough for the light from the front window to catch the side of my face. Her scream was audible even from outside. Wes ran to the window. I stepped back into the dark. The door flung open, her silhouette outlined in the warm cabin light. "Reed?" she yelled into the trees. I said nothing. I was already walking up the trail to my car. Not fast, not slow, just with that hollow weight in my chest that comes when a storm breaks. But the wind hasn't stopped. I didn't answer her calls that night. Not when they started. Not when they doubled. Not even when the last one came in at 2:37 a.m. with her voice on voicemail whispering, "Please come back. I didn't know you were there." She was right. She didn't know I was there. Just like she didn't know the man she'd made into a joke would be the one who quietly ended the performance mid-scene and walked off stage before the applause faded. I ignored her calls for 2 full days. I didn't block her. I didn't text back. I didn't give her anything. Not a reaction, not an explanation, not even a breadcrumb. Just silence. The kind of silence that becomes a mirror. That's the thing about people like Callie. They perform best when they know someone's watching. But when the audience disappears, when the applause dies down, they get lost in the quiet. By Sunday night, I came home to find her sitting at the kitchen table, fully dressed like she hadn't been sure how formal the confrontation would be. Hair brushed, makeup subtle, hands clasped. Her expression tried to say reasonable, but her eyes were frantic. She'd lit a candle. One of those ones that smells like hotel lobbies and fake eucalyptus. I almost laughed. Instead, I walked past her, dropped my keys in the bowl by the door, and opened the fridge. The orange juice was expired. Of course it was. "You didn't answer," she said finally. I turned. "I know." She cleared her throat. I panicked when I saw you. At the cabin. I didn't know what to say." "That was obvious," I muttered, then immediately hated how petty I sounded. But I didn't take it back. "I'm sorry, Ruben. I really am." She stood up, like height might give her more credibility. "It didn't mean anything. I've been under pressure, and I needed to feel seen, and you've been so distant, and—" "No," I cut in. "We're not doing that. You don't get to flip this around like I drifted first." Her face tightened, just for a second. like the mask cracked. I took a deep breath. How long? Her mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. Does it matter? That's not an answer. For months, she whispered. I nodded. Not because I believed her, but because I didn't have the energy to push for the real number. For months. For months of laughing with him behind my back. For months of comparing me to someone else, not in her head, but in actual text messages. In voice notes. In stolen weekends. I pulled out my phone, opened the photos, set the screen down on the table between us. It played automatically. A short clip. Wes lighting a fire. Her pouring wine. Her leaning into him and saying something I couldn't hear, but didn't need to. Her smile was soft. Familiar. She stared at the screen, mouth slightly open. You recorded us? No, I said. I recorded myself finally seeing clearly. The screen went black. I didn't touch it. Callie sat down again. Slowly. Like she'd aged in the last 60 seconds. I don't want to lose you, she said, reaching across the table. I didn't move. You know me, Ruben. You know my heart. This wasn't about replacing you. I know, I said quietly. It was about pretending I didn't matter. She blinked. Her hand stayed suspended in the air, unsure whether to pull back or keep trying. I stood up. Where are you going? She asked. To think. You've been thinking for days. Exactly. And I walked into the spare room, the one she used to call her home office, the one that had become a graveyard of forgotten hobbies and unopened books, and I locked the door behind me. For the first time since the gala, I felt control returning to my body. Not power, not revenge, just clarity. She was still sitting there on the other side of that door, probably rehearsing a different version of the truth. One where she was the victim of stress. One where I'd stopped loving her first. One where the man who walked out of the ballroom was just too sensitive. But she had forgotten something. I was the only one who remembered the exact moment the seat beside her became empty, and exactly how long she kept laughing before she noticed. The next morning, I woke up before she did. Not because I wanted to. My body just refused to rest anymore. Sleep had become hostile territory. My mind would replay that laugh, that toast, that one-liner she dropped so easily in front of all those people, like I was just a placeholder husband waiting to be phased out in the next software update. I made coffee, sat at the kitchen table, same spot where she had tried to reach for me the night before. She didn't come out of the bedroom. Good. I checked my work email. Not because I cared about forklift schedules or warehouse updates, just because I needed to feel like some part of my life still had rules, still made sense. That's when I saw it. A message from Callie. Subject line, talking points, Friday panel. It had been accidentally forwarded from her work account to mine. Probably muscle memory. She used to email me notes to proofread all the time, back when we were still a team. But this one wasn't meant for me. It included a thread. Long one. Internal back and forths between her, her manager, and, of course, Wes. I didn't know what I expected, but it wasn't this. The subject was supposed to be about her upcoming panel on leadership and brand storytelling. But someone in the email chain had included a slide deck draft. And in that deck, 2 slides in, there was a photo of me, taken from the gala. It was a blurry shot from the side, mid-joke, while everyone at the table laughed and I sat there frozen, holding a glass of water like a damn accessory. The slide was titled, The Non-Target Audience, Knowing When Not to Market to Certain Archetypes. I stared at it for a full minute before I understood what it meant. They were using me as an example. A symbol of who not to waste marketing on. Emotionally rigid, low digital engagement, passive consumer behavior, the notes said. Supportive, but ultimately immobile. Represents the audience we must evolve past. Callie hadn't written those words, but she'd replied to the email chain with a thumbs-up emoji and an upside-down face. She had signed off on it. The man who packed her lunch during her overnight projects. The man who picked her up from the airport after red ice. The man who took a second job for a year so she could launch her own freelance agency before getting hired at her current firm. I was now a case study, an archetype, a cautionary tale. I didn't get angry, not in the dramatic, movie kind of way. I just closed my laptop, walked back into the bedroom, and picked up the ring box from my dresser. The one I'd planned to use for our vow renewal in the spring. She had no idea I'd even bought it. It had a small engraving inside. Still you. Always you. The irony stung. She stirred in bed as I placed it on her pillow, right next to where her head had been resting. I didn't say anything. I just left it there and walked into the living room. 10 minutes later, she came out with the box in her hand. Ruben, what is this? I didn't answer. I simply picked up the remote and muted the TV. Is this a joke? Now she was trembling. Not in fear. In disbelief. Did you go through my work emails? No, I said. They came to me. Like truth usually does when people get too comfortable. She sank onto the couch, ring box still open in her hand. I didn't mean it that way. That wasn't what it looked like. It was a branding example. You don't get to explain what I'm allowed to feel humiliated by, Callie. There was silence again. Not the heavy, suspenseful kind. The sad, unraveling kind. The kind that lets you see the holes in everything you've built. Then she whispered, "Do you hate me?" I turned to her. No. I think that's the worst part. I don't hate you at all. I just don't trust that you ever really saw me as someone who mattered once you no longer needed me to. She blinked fast, holding the box tighter. And you know what? I added, standing up. You can keep it. The ring. The box. The version of me you thought was harmless. Where are you going? She asked again, voice breaking this time. Somewhere I don't have to be explained. I left her there on the couch, the muted TV flashing news segments in silence, and the ring, my ring, still in her hands like an unopened apology. 3 days after I walked out, she sent me an email. Not a text, not a voicemail, an email, formatted like a resignation letter, but written like a TED Talk. It was titled, "A Letter I Hope You'll Read When You're Ready." I almost deleted it. Not because I didn't care, quite the opposite, but because I already knew what it would say. Callie had always been good with words. She could spin any situation into a lesson, a reframe, a personal breakthrough that conveniently skipped the part where someone else had to pay the price. But I opened it anyway, and I read every single word. She didn't deny what happened. That was the first surprise. No deflection. No, you misunderstood. No, it was a moment of weakness. She laid it all out. How it started, how it escalated, how she knew she should have stopped it, but didn't. Not because she didn't love me, she said, but because she forgot what love was supposed to look like when everything around her kept rewarding ambition over loyalty. She admitted that Wes never meant anything long-term, that he didn't even make her feel safe, just sharp, seen, relevant, that in his eyes, she felt like a star, and in mine, she'd started to feel like a rerun. That part stuck with me, because maybe she wasn't wrong. I had retreated, into work, into quiet, into that gray zone where you stop trying to impress the person you already have. But the thing is, Callie didn't ask to be seen again. She asked to be worshipped. And that's a very different thing. In the middle of the email, she included a link. It was to a private folder on her cloud drive. Inside, photos from the cabin. But not the kind I had taken. These were from her phone. Images she had snapped while Wes wasn't looking. Her face wasn't smiling in any of them. She wasn't performing. She looked distant, uncomfortable. And in one, she'd even zoomed in on the back of his head, captioned quietly with a note. Not who I thought he'd be. I sat with that for a while. Then I noticed something else, another file in the folder. An audio recording, labeled only with a date, the same weekend she'd gone to the cabin. I pressed play. It was muffled at first. Just background sounds. Wind. A fireplace crackling. Then her voice. Don't call me that. Please. A pause. Wes, what? I was joking. Callie, you don't even know me. You just know who I pretend to be around people like you. Another pause. Wes, so what are we doing here? Her voice, quieter now, burning the last part of something I don't want to carry back home. The file ended. No screaming. No drama. Just the hollow sound of someone realizing they'd built a fire with the wrong kind of wood, and the smoke had followed them home. She didn't send the file to explain herself. She didn't ask for me to come back. She said that in her final paragraph. I don't expect forgiveness. I expect silence. Because that's what I gave you when I laughed too loudly while you faded in the background. And that's what I deserve. I just needed you to know before I leave. Leave? That word sat differently. And sure enough, when I came back home the next day, her closet was half empty. The keys were on the counter. And a yellow sticky note was stuck to the fridge. Not a goodbye. Not a sorry. Just, don't stop showing up for yourself now that I'm not here to distract you. It should have made me angry. It didn't. Because it wasn't an ending. It was a realization. She had finally noticed the chair was empty. But I'd already pulled it out, folded it up, and taken it with me. It's been 6 months since I left the ring on the pillow. 6 months since I walked away, not just from Callie, but from the version of myself that stayed silent too long, smiled too politely, forgave too quickly. The version that thought love meant shrinking just enough to make room for someone else's spotlight. For a while, I floated. Half here, half there. Mornings were the hardest. Waking up alone in a space that still smelled like shared history. I didn't touch the bed on her side. Didn't move her mugs. Didn't delete her saved shows from the streaming account. It felt like erasing proof that I was once chosen. But healing doesn't look like fire or fury. It looks like little things. Like making pancakes for no one but yourself. Like laughing at a movie without waiting to see if someone else is laughing too. Like not checking your phone every 10 minutes to see if they changed their mind. I went back to school. Nothing major, just night classes at the community college. Creative writing. I didn't even know why I signed up. Maybe I needed to tell my story before it fossilized. Maybe I needed to hear other people say things out loud I'd only ever whispered in my own head. It was there I met Mara. She wasn't flashy. She didn't light up rooms. She didn't have a curated laugh or a LinkedIn following. She had ink on her knuckles and paint under her nails. She taught art therapy to kids and drove an old truck that rattled like it had secrets. The first time we talked, she asked what I wrote about. I told her chairs, ones that used to be full, ones I never sat in, ones I gave away too easily. She didn't laugh. She just nodded and said, "Sounds like you've got good stories." And too many people who didn't listen to them. We didn't start anything right away. I didn't want to rush toward someone just to get away from someone else. But over time, it happened. Naturally. No applause. No scenes. One day I looked up, and she was already sitting across from me, coffee in hand, eyes on mine. Not over my shoulder, not around the room. Just me. Last week, I took her to a small reading event at the campus library. My piece was short, awkward, kind of rambly, but honest. I talked about leaving a dinner early. About being the punchline. About how sometimes walking away isn't quitting, it's finally showing up. When I finished, there was polite clapping. But from Mara, just a small smile. And a full chair beside her, waiting for me to come back. And this time I did. Willingly. Proudly. Because when the joke fades, the lights dim, and the noise dies down, what really matters is who's still sitting next to you. And who never made you feel like you had to earn the right to be there in the first place.